Welcome in, Ethan Skolnick, starting 9 here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel, here every Tuesday and Wednesday at roughly 9 o'clock. The producer is Manny Chang. The guest today will be Brady Hawk. The topic is the Miami Heat. Thanks again to our sponsors. Make sure you check them out. That's what keeps us going here, including our friends over at everythingtradeshows.com. Everythingtradeshows.com is where you need to go if your company is going back to trade shows. If you don't run the company, then mention it to your boss. Hey, this is a really cool place I heard about on the 5 Reasons Sports Network that will do the booth. They will render the booth for you for free. They will show you exactly how it's going to look. 954-791-8882. They've worked with companies like Microsoft, Citrix, and others. They're based right here in Fort Lauderdale, but they service all 50 states. And again, people are going back to trade shows. You look at the convention centers down here in Broward and in Miami Beach. So go to everythingtradeshows.com, get your business in front of people and get it looking nice. Reach out to Chris, 954-791-8882. All right, we come to you here on another Miami Heat game day. The Heat play the Portland Trail Blazers tonight. They're coming off a win against the Raptors on Monday. Good morning to Big Dan. We appreciate you joining us here on the channel. Of course, we'll try to read your comments. If you use a super chat, we will absolutely make sure that we read your comment and answer your question, and Brady will as well. And again, Brady's going to be here in a few minutes. Tonight, the Blazers. CJ McCollum is back. No Dame Lillard, obviously. Probably, I would guess, for the season. If you take a look at the standings in the West, even though the West is way down this year from where it typically is, the Blazers just don't look like they can challenge for anything more than a play-in at this stage. And so I would anticipate we're going to get the Dame Lillard shutdown a little bit later in the year. And there has been this pivot from West to East. It's finally happened. It's taken about 2 decades. There was a 2-decade period from 1999 forward where the 8th seed in the West, good morning, Mike, the 8th seed in the West had a better record than the 8th seed in the East. It was since 1999. That was the Knicks. And of course, we know what happened. They beat the Heat, who were the number 1 seed. And the Knicks were the 8th seed that year. But because only 50 games were played because of a work stoppage, they were only 6 games behind the Heat, even though the Heat were 1 and the Knicks were 8. So they weren't really a true number 8 seed. But that is the last time that the 8th seed in the East, and I think there was 1 year, might have been 2019, where it was like tied, or maybe the West was 1 game behind. But otherwise, the depth of the 2 conferences has always, again, over the past quarter century, been towards the West. And this year it's not. If you look at the standings this year, I was doing this morning, you have in the Eastern Conference. Now the top teams are in the West, okay? It's top heavy. The top 4 records in the entire NBA are in the West. So if you just look at the top of the standings, you'd be like, okay, it's like it's always was, right? The Suns, the Warriors, the Grizzlies, and the Jazz. They're all in the West. But then the next best records are all in the East. The Bulls, the Heat, the Nets, the Cavs, the Bucks, and then the Sixers before you get to the Mavericks. So it's literally top 4 are in the West, next 6 are in the East, and then you get to a team in the West. So the depth in the West is actually much weaker, because once you get beyond that, the Nuggets are only 2 games over 500, and they're in the 6th seed. And right now, the Sixers are 7 games over 500 in the 6th seed. The Hornets are 4 games over 500 in the 7th seed. The Wolves and Lakers are tied for the 7th seed, and they're 500. So if you take a look at the West, there is an opportunity for the Blazers. I mean, technically right now, they're actually in the back end of the play-in. They're the 10 seed. So they're behind the Wolves, the Lakers, and the Clippers, who may not get their stars back this season, then them, and then they're right ahead of the Kings. So even as down as the Blazers are, they're ahead of the Kings. But I don't know that fighting for a play-in spot is going to be what brings Dame Lillard back this season. And so the Blazers are not what they were. And this is the type of game, and if you look at the next 3 games for the Heat, they're playing against arguably the 3 most disappointing teams in the entire NBA. I mean, the Blazers at 18-25, and that's with 2 straight wins. The Lakers at 22-22, and the Hawks, they're way down there. See, with their record, they would actually be in a play-in spot in the West. And in the East, they're 18-25. This was a conference finals team last year. And by the way, because I tweeted this yesterday and this got a little bit of attention, can we maybe say that last year was the fluke, not the bubble season? Because we keep doing this about the bubble season, right? Or at least not related to the Heat. Since the bubble season, I tweeted this yesterday. The 4 teams that were in the Final Four, okay? The Heat, the Celtics, the Lakers, and the Nuggets. There's only one that's been called a bubble fraud. Only one that's been called a bubble fluke. The Heat, right? Well, since that season, the Nuggets have won 69 regular season games. The Heat have won 68. And the Celtics and the Lakers, particularly the Celtics, lag far behind. So maybe the Celtics and the Lakers were the bubble flukes? Is that possible? Maybe it wasn't Miami? But maybe the real fluky thing was last year. And that's why Giannis's comment about like the bubble and the Heat and they benefited from the bubble or whatever the hell it was, which is the most ridiculous thing. And I've said that so many times because, I mean, basically what other teams are saying if they're complaining about the Heat getting to the finals that year is, well, their coach is better than ours, and their players are more disciplined than ours, and they took basketball more seriously than we do, and they have a better organization, so they were able to benefit from the bubble. I mean, it's the stupidest thing ever. Like, the bubble was the truest test of organizational strength, right? Like, you had to keep your players in line, you had to keep them focused, you had to keep them on a schedule, and, you know, everybody had the same playing field. Because there were no fans. There was no travel. There was none of the other stuff. I mean, do you know that, again, as Portland plays Miami tonight, that Miami typically travels the most miles in a given season because we're all the way the hell down here? And the only team that's like close is Orlando. Second, by the way, is Portland usually. Nobody talks about that. That year, the bubble leveled the playing field. Nobody had to travel anywhere. Right? So the whole bubble fluke thing was kind of ridiculous. But if you talk about a real fluke, I mean, the Hawks making the conference finals last year, the Knicks making the playoffs, said so at the time. Both of those teams benefited from the fact that they didn't make the bubble. Right? They had like several extra months. Crazy. And this is the tweet from our Brian Fonseca. You can find on Bahama Rican Boys. KD's foot, Harden's hamstring, Kyrie's ankle. They beat the Hawks in the ECF. This is about the Bucks. The only 2 times Milwaukee beat Miami that whole season was in the bubble. People try to diminish the bubble because of who got there. If you could have won, you should have. Exactly, Brian. Exactly. So the whole bubble thing is just stupid. But now we're seeing it, right? Now we're seeing. I mean, Portland. Nobody talks about that. I mean, Portland in the bubble. Remember that? Like they surprised people. Dame kind of went nuts. It's just the Heat. It's just the Heat who were the fluke. All right, so let's pivot to now, and we're going to bring Brady on. Before we do, I want to mention one of our sponsors, prizepicks.com. Go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. You get your initial deposit match. Every morning I wake up, and I get the list from Prize Picks of people who signed up with our code, which is great. And there's all these people that don't deposit. You actually have to deposit money to win money. That's the one thing. I don't want to mislead anybody. This is not free. Okay, it's not free. It's just that they are giving you some free money. They are. I mean, but the whole thing is not free. Like, they don't just give you $100 and you sign off the app. Okay, it's not how it works. But if you put down $100, they will match you $100. And then you can play 20, you can play 30, you can play 40, you can play 10. Okay, I've done that before. Okay, if you don't feel that confident about something. And you can play the flex play. And the way the flex play works is, like, say you pick like 3 players. You may only need 2 of them to hit. Okay, and again, they could be across sports. You could play NHL. You could play Barkov. I don't know if I would have done it last night. You could play Barkov and Butler if you want. That's fine. Okay, so go to prizepicks.com. Use the code 5. This is the official fantasy partner of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. All right. Brady is here. You can find him at Brady Hawk 305. You can also find his work on the YouTube channel, as everybody knows, is Brady's Breakdowns. And you can also find him on 5 on the Floor on occasion. And our friend Eric Rubenstein, the personal injury attorney, officially sponsors that. So check him out on Instagram. Ask about me. I got you, which is I don't even know how that one was available. But anyway, Eric's a big Miami Heat fan. All right, Brady, let's get to it because I'm looking at the standings and it is a weird thing right now. Like your top 4 teams by record are in the West. Your next 6 teams are in the East. And then once you go a little bit deeper, the depth continues to kind of trend towards the East instead of the West here. So we know what the landscape is right now for Miami. Like there are 5 or 6 pretty good teams in the Eastern Conference, but nobody great. Like that's kind of where it's at. How do they separate themselves to be great here in the second half of the year? Give me a couple of keys.
Well, I think the first one is health. Like obviously, like if you look at not only Miami, because obviously they've been impacted by health, but the rest of the league. You look at the other top teams sitting there, like Chicago without Levine, Brooklyn's not going to have Kevin Durant. Like all these teams are impacted by it. But the other thing I think is the home game thing. Like they actually have home games in this part of the schedule. Like I don't think they had. It felt like they were on the road the entire season so far. So now I think March, especially once they hit March, there's going to be a ton of home games, and I think that's the big thing. Like if they can stay around 1, 2, 3 over the rest of January into February, and they head into March in that section, like that is when I think they could separate themselves in the standings specifically, because I really think March is when they can really separate themselves in there. And just specifically being great in general, it just feels like the development of certain guys, the higher level guys. Like we've seen the development of the lower level guys in this roster, like the Max Strus, like the Caleb Martin. But now you're going to want to see, as we talked about, the development of Bam, the development of Jimmy and Kyle and Bam playing together. What Victor Oladipo, where he stands on the roster. I just feel like it's going to be development of the higher level guys down the stretch of the season, because obviously we want to say the playoffs, it'll all come together. But obviously, you're going to need a little bit of gel time before you get there if you want to shrivel down the rotation as we expect.
All right, so let's go through that, because that was actually where I was going to pivot this episode to. So I'm going to give you a name, 30 seconds or less. Tell me what you want to see here in the second half. Maybe that's a little different than what we've seen so far. Jimmy Butler.
Well, first of all, probably playing. I think a lot of these guys are going to say is just probably playing, but I do think less of the weight on him. I feel like he's had a lot of weight when he has played. Like obviously he's had time off, but without Bam Adebayo, like he's had the reps very, very high on that side of the floor. Like I talked about the mid post things. Like Jimmy and Bam are the point of the offense is to basically split reps. They're like running backs. Like you want to split the reps in a lot of ways. Without the other running back, Jimmy has had every single rep that I think you're going to want to see him put in different spots of the floor. I know a lot of people talk about the layups thing because he had that couple of games where he struggled around the rim, but you want to see him getting those one-on-ones. You want to see him running pick and rolls instead of trying to play make for others. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing down the stretch, is trying to just figure out different ways to utilize him.
Bam Adebayo.
I think that's just aggression. And I know you talked about that a lot, but I do think it's going to be, we know what he is as a player. Like we know how gifted he is as a passer. We know what gifted he is as a versatile big defensively. But it is going to be late in the fourth quarter when you're sitting there and Tyler's being bombarded like the last game and turnovers are happening. Then Jimmy gets ripped. Like you need to give the ball to your franchise player in Bam Adebayo and say, go get a bucket under 2 minutes to go. That's going to be the next step. That I think there's going to be times when Spoelstra almost does that to test him. If they're sitting in a decent spot, I know he wants to win every game, but there's going to be times where I think you see him test Bam. And I think that's just the thing I'm going to be watching second half.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. He has done that kind of thing before. It goes under the radar sometimes, and then you get to the playoffs and like, wait, that's the reason he did that, because this situation came up when they needed it. All right, one more before our break here. Kyle Lowry.
That's an interesting one, because I feel like his is the opposite of Jimmy. I think it's also rest, because he has played like, if we talked about before the season, which guy would probably miss the most games or which guy would have to need the most rest, it would be Kyle Lowry. And it's been the complete opposite. He's had so much on his plate from the beginning that we talk about no Jimmy, no Bam. Everything's worked through him and PJ. PJ goes in that same line as well. But I do think on the floor, I do want to see a little bit more off the ball stuff, because we talk about so much things. Putting him next to Tyler, obviously he's off the ball more. But I do want to see when Bam and Jimmy return, and you look at second half of the season when everybody's there, less on his plate offensively. Like you want to see him in the corner in a PJ way in some possessions. Like you don't want every single time he comes down as everything's working through him. And I think that's going to be the big thing playoff wise. I think he's going to have more. I think you're going to see a different Kyle Lowry playoff time, but I do think second half of the regular season is going to even be different from that, because playoff time Kyle Lowry, it does not feel like he's going to be playing this way. Like the shot attempts are going to go up. His rim attempt, getting to the rim is going to go up. I just feel like now is when 3-point attempts are probably a little higher than it will be in playoff time. And that's okay. But I think right now you're going to want to see a little bit more off the ball and less on his plate.
All right, we're going to get to Tyler and a couple of others here in a second. Before we do, another of our sponsors here on the 5 Reasons YouTube channel and of Starting 9. It's our friends over at Intense Nutrition. Intense Nutrition is where you want to go if you're tired of the 3-letter chain. You know, the one you walk in, they tell you exactly what you should buy because corporate told them to do it. Well, this is not a corporate store, okay? So check out Intense Nutrition on Facebook and on Instagram. That's the name. Call them at 954-775-0257. That's 954-775-0257. You can see all the products they have there. 20% off everything in the store but protein, okay? And so that's like 90% of the stuff that you see there is 20% off, okay? So they do the pre-workout, the post-workout. They can help you lose weight. They can help you gain muscle. Whatever it is that you're looking for, they'll work with you directly on it. So go to Intense Nutrition, again, on Facebook and Instagram, or give them a call, 954-775-0257. Call ahead. They'll have a stack waiting for you. It's right there, again, in Coral Springs off of University Drive. All right, Tyler Herro. I feel like the last game, we kind of saw some of what we want to start seeing. One of the things we've talked about, his ability to score over length. You look at some of the potential matchups they could see in a first-round series, a Cleveland, a Toronto. That's something that's going to become necessary. I thought that was really promising the other night.
Yeah, and I felt like I've talked about that. He's kind of beat every coverage of switching, drop, blitzing. That was the final one. And it almost felt like there were times, even if we're not talking about the lengthy teams like Cleveland or Toronto, where teams would put their lengthiest guy, most versatile guy on Tyler to see if they could bother him, because that was the one thing. And he found little individual advantages in that last game, like where he would kind of read the situation and just kind of beat his guy off a high pick and roll where he would insert it high. I think you're seeing that thing. But when talking about the second half of the season, what I want to see, we talked a lot about his playmaking, and that's all been great. Like, that's a development that you need when we're talking about a young player. But now you have Bam Adebayo back. You're going to have Kyle Lowry back. You have Jimmy back. 3 really good playmakers as a whole. Like, you want to see Tyler Herro, the scoring. Like, you want to see scoring Tyler Herro. The playmaking will come along in the natural flow of the game. But I think you just want to see Tyler continue what you saw in the Toronto game, where you just see him go nuclear offensively, where he's just looking for his bucket, looking to score. And I think that's what you're going to see, because the playmaking is coming along natural flow of the game, but it also feels like it's a little forced because of the guys they don't have around him, the other playmakers that they're without. And I think in the playoffs, he's not going to be the playmaking Tyler Herro. They're not going to ask him to be playmaking Tyler Herro. So I think you want to see him start to get into the flow of what you're going to see in playoffs.
Yeah, and I hope the scoring comes, because I'm pretty close to being right, but not there yet. As far as him leading the team in scoring, he's about a point.
Yeah.
He's 1.4 behind Jimmy right now. I don't know that that's necessarily going to flip, but I do think it could tighten a little bit over the course of the rest of the season. I also think he's got 6 man of the year locked up at this point.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody else that jumps out. All right, we'll do these quicker here as we finish. And again, check out our sponsors, prizepicks.com. Use the code 5 Tense Nutrition and everythingtradeshows.com. Try to give me like a couple of words on each of these guys. All right, Max Strus.
Do exactly what he's been doing. I feel like it's just continue to plug away. We'll see what happens with Duncan, but if he can continue to shoot the ball like this, he's going to have a shot in the rotation.
PJ Tucker.
Once again, change nothing. Like, I don't see a way that you could ask him to do anything else. Like, I know Jimmy called him, they call him 47 right now. I don't think he's ever been called like 45 or 44 in his career. Like, this is a different type of PJ Tucker that if he continues to shoot the ball like this, it's just changes everything for your offense.
Gabe Vincent.
I think it's interesting because there's a little couple of different ways you can go with this, because I feel like we've seen so many things with Gabe where the jump shot has come along, and I know that is the thing we talk about most, but there's these other parts of his game that are plugging away, that if you continue to see the playmaking things where Kyle Lowry's out and he just totally fills that void fully, or he fills the gaps of these other guys, like, that is when the real discussion comes into rotation. So I do want to see a little bit more of this other stuff that we've been seeing develop.
Caleb Martin.
I just think he's a rotation guy. Like, I think he's a lock. Like, I think he's taken the minutes of Markieff Morris. I think that when you talk about Victor Oladipo coming back, I think it's not just, Victor Oladipo is a former all-star that he's just going to have his spot in the rotation. Like, Victor Oladipo is going to have to earn it, because you have a guy in Caleb Martin that is his type of same player, because he can shoot the 3 occasionally, he can get to the rim, he can defend, that there's actually somebody there that they can utilize. That I think either way, I think they're going to use Caleb Martin in the rotation playoff-wise, and I think obviously they're going to have to convert his contract over to get it there.
All right, here's the hard one. Duncan Robinson.
I think it's just shoot the ball. I think it was Alex the other night that talked about Max Strus, how no matter what's happening, he just shoots it. Like he does not care. And I think that's what there's a couple different elements with Jimmy and the Strus thing, but I think that's a respect level that Strus doesn't care. Like Strus just gets it up that he does that. And I feel like there's too many times we could talk about 0 for 8 Duncan Robinson threes in a certain night, but like when there's times where he kind of hesitates, like for a half a second, that I did not see last season, or I did not see even his rookie year, that half hesitation, even when there's only one guy on him, like that can't be the case. Like if he wants to continue to be the starter, to be in the rotation, it's just shoot the ball, and then the ball will go in eventually. You just have to just continue, just get it up immediately.
You mentioned his name, Victor Oladipo.
Yeah, I think comeback. I think it's just coming back soon and getting in the rotation late season, developing relationships with guys on the floor. Like I just feel like we keep talking about it on paper, but we don't know what it's going to look like on the floor. Like I just feel like I think the big thing is defensively. Like I feel like offensively they can plug him in wherever. I just want to see speed and quickness and agility defensively because we don't really know how. It's a different type of injury. This isn't a like injury like Bam where it'll develop over time and he just has to get used to it. This is a different type of injury that you don't know what's going to happen from there. I think he will be fine. I think there's actually, tying it back to Caleb, I think there's a way that they can utilize both of them because I feel like both of them can actually be really important in their own ways because they're so, two-way players that are really versatile. But I do think that Victor Oladipo on paper is the perfect bench guy to put next to Tyler Herro. You talk about a little bit of on-ball creation. Every time he comes back for an injury, catch and shoot threes go up. He's a defensive guy. He doesn't really need the spotlight. He can let Tyler get it and have the ball in his hands in that position when they're on the floor. Like he's the perfect guy on paper. It just comes down to late season if he can develop it before the playoffs.
All right, follow Brady at BradyHawk305. We appreciate Manny Chang producing this morning. We got a new episode of 5 on the Floor that's going up shortly. Alana joined us last night. We compared the 2020 Heat to the 2022 Heat, not just on the floor, but also off the floor. And we came to some conclusions that may surprise you. So check out 5 on the Floor. That should be up here on the YouTube channel and on the podcast feeds soon. Brady will be at the game tonight. What's your record?
Oh, I don't. Am I at the game?
Oh, no, you're not at the game tonight. Alejandro's at the game tonight. Oh, okay. We'll blame him. One of our producers, the YouTube channel. Alejandro is there with Alex. So Alex will be holding people accountable. Brady will be back covering the game next week. The good thing is we can spread them around now. They actually, like you said, they actually play at home. Have a good day, everybody.